Hey book readers, we're about to get all Rickstees up in here as I play tour guide on a literary trip to one of my 7 favorite continents, Europe. That's right, each of the 8 books that I'm recommending in this video is set in a different European country. At least, I think they are because, let's be honest, European geography isn't exactly a forte of Americans like me. Guten Tag! Hope you packed your favorite lederhosen or dirndl because our first book is Eifelheim by Michael Flynn, which is set in Germany. In this historical sci-fi book, a historian and a physicist in the present day figure out that there was this tiny German town of Eifelheim back in the 1300s that was abandoned and the area was never resettled, which doesn't make sense because the spot it was in should have brought people back to it, so they're trying to figure out why. Now that setup is only a small part of the book. The main focus is on the other timeline, Eifelheim itself in the 1300s, as the Black Death is running rampant and humanity is experiencing its first contact with aliens. Now that's not a spoiler, it's on the book jacket, but it's this mishmash of ingredients that makes the book so interesting. There's Christianity, aliens like E.T. trying to get home, and a German village. My favorite part of this book is probably the way the author created a rich, detailed description of medieval Europe, and then tossed little green men into the setting just to see what would happen. The way we slowly uncover what happened in Eifelheim and why makes this book really tough to put down too. So if you enjoy a main course of historical fiction with side dishes of sci-fi and mystery with a German chocolate dessert, this is the perfect read for you. Zdravo, and get set for The Cellist of Sarajevo, a book written by Stephen Galloway and set in Bosnia. This is a great work of historical fiction set during the siege of Sarajevo in the 1990s. It features 3 narrators, a talented sniper, a man braving the dangers of the city to get water for his family, and a baker who has become numb and isolated. What ties them all together is a cellist who plays for 22 days straight in a city square to honor victims of a recent bombing, knowing that he himself could get shot and killed at any point. So in all the chaos and destruction of Sarajevo, a tiny scrap of beauty remains. It's this power of music that keeps the 3 characters fighting in their own ways. The book touches on the nature of heroism, the power of art, and the will of people to persevere. There's absolutely beautiful writing that alternates chapters between the characters, giving us different internal perspectives and personal wars happening in the characters rather than the external battles happening in the city. Bonjour and bienvenue to our next literary stop, France, for the cute book Perestroika in Paris, which was written by Jane Smiley about the unlikely friendships in the animal world. The premise for this book is that a racehorse escapes his enclosure and begins wandering around Paris, trying to stay on the lam for as long as possible. His new home becomes the Champ de Mars, probably mispronouncing that, a green space near the Eiffel Tower. It's there that the horse, named Perestroika, or Paris for short, meets a dog, a raven, a couple of mallards, and a black rat. Each of these talking animals has a unique personality and plays a small part in Perestroika's low-stakes adventure. They all team up to keep the horse hidden, fed, and free. Overall, it's a sweet escape with a touch of humor that kind of felt like some story I might make up for my own kids. I guess you could say it has a certain je ne sais quoi, whatever that means. Huva Paiva! We're off to our next country, Finland, to talk about The Year of the Hare by Arto Pasilina. I hope I pronounced that right. This funny novella begins with a journalist hitting a rabbit with his car, breaking the bunny's leg. But then things get interesting because the man, Vatanen, then decides to drop everything in his life and take care of his new furry friend. While wandering around the woods, hijinks ensue. We're talking run-ins with strange people and fearsome creatures, the discovery of lost treasures, and polygamy. It's a book about freedom and not being tethered to anything or anyone. It's that kind of freedom we all sometimes crave. You know, life without the weight and expectations of society. The Year of the Hare is really short at 135 pages, and it's really entertaining. It's a nice, light read that you can easily finish in a day or a weekend. Vasher! We're heading to Viking country for our next read, Norwegian by Night by Derek B. Miller. This book's main character is Sheldon, an 82-year-old ex-Marine whose wife recently died. Because he may be starting to suffer from dementia, he's forced to move from the US to Oslo, Norway, to live with his granddaughter. And in doing so, he becomes a fish out of water. Now things start to heat up as, after witnessing a murder, he rescues the victim's 6-year-old son and goes on the run with him, trying to keep the kid safe from the killer. But he's being pursued by the gang who committed the crime and the Norwegian police. Remember, Sheldon is American and the boy is Norwegian, so they can't even talk. Plus, his mind may not quite be what it once was. He has a fading memory, and that memory is filled with guilt, loss, and pain. Of course, the Scandinavian setting and the older protagonist with a past gave it a little bit of a man called Uwe vibe to it. And there's plenty of heart in this low-key crime thriller as well. Hello and welcome to England. Wow, my pronunciation of English is pretty good. Our next book takes place on the island of Great Britain, and it's The Book Eaters by Sun Yi Dean. This fantasy horror novel focuses on a group of people living in northern England who have a unique trait. Their food is books, and by eating a book, they can remember what was written in it. The protagonist, Devon, is one of the few remaining female book eaters, and her life sucks. She's basically raised to be a mother to more of her kind. She's practically her husband's prisoner and is expected to lead the most mundane life ever. But when she has a son, he has the curse of not craving books to eat, but human minds. So there's suddenly a vampire vibe to it, and they have to go on the run so her son can survive and not be killed by his own kind. It's a story about family, freedom, and being different from others. There's action-packed sections where the characters are, like I said, on the run or fighting for their lives, as well as calmer sections that give you a good sense of the sheltered life of the main character, Devon, and the predictable, monotonous lives that her species are subjected to. And the book does a good job with its style of alternating chapters that take place in the past and present until you're totally, completely caught up in the present. It's an easy structure to follow that sometimes doesn't work all that well, but in The Book Eaters, it really does. Yassas! It's time to take this literary odyssey to Greece with The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. Now, I've talked about this book a couple of times before. One of the main characters is Nico Crispus, an 11-year-old Jewish boy living in Thessaloniki, Greece in the 1930s. Nico has never told a lie, and that's used against him by a Nazi officer who gets Nico to convince his neighbors to board cattle cars. Obviously, they're hoping to be taken somewhere safe with food and jobs, but that's not where they're going. When Nico learns what he's unwittingly done through his lie, he feels immense guilt and shame. This also leads him to becoming a pathological liar, telling lies about almost anything and everything. This book moves at a brisk pace, with the narrator, which is actually Truth, regularly switching between locations and characters, but it's never jarring. Throughout the book, the characters are trying to right past wrongs, achieve forgiveness, and live their lives in the shadows of past horrors. Albom does a fantastic job of building the story into a crescendo over the course of the book, a la Brandon Sanderson, where the final few chapters are packed with action and have a satisfying resolution. And we arrived at our final destination, Sweden, for one of Fredrik Backman's very best novels, Bear Town. I've talked about this one before, and you've probably either heard of it or read it already, but if you haven't, here's why you should. This intense novel is set in a hockey-obsessed town in Sweden and follows several Bear Town residents, including members of the junior ice hockey team and their families. It starts off slowly, but this tight-knit community is soon torn apart by a violent act. Because of this inciting incident, the sleepy town becomes filled with hate, anger, resentment, prejudices, and tons of tension between the characters. And the characters, like any Bachman novel, are outstanding. Overall, it's a rough ride that digs into the dark side of human nature, how a person's reputation can change, and the power of community over its residents. Are you going anywhere this summer? Let me know in the comments where you're off to and if you're reading anything to get you in the mood for it. I'll be checking out Mexico City for a few days with my wife, so be sure to share any books set there with me, please. Safe travels and happy reading.